Hey, welcome back, everybody. Glad that you are here. We're the brand new series. I talked about it last week. I'm just excited because as I studied and prepared, I thought, wow, this is good stuff, man. TrueVine community groups are going to benefit. And so tonight I want to start our lesson 1 on what is water walking. What is water walking? Our foundation scripture is going to be found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. Verses 25 through 29. Let me read it from the easy to read version because it's easy for me to read. Funny. But it says this in verse 25. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus' followers were still in a boat. Jesus came to them and he was walking on the water. When they saw him walking on the water, it scared them. It's a ghost, they cried, screaming in fear. But Jesus quickly spoke to them and he said, "Don't worry, it's me. Don't be afraid." Peter said, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come on the water." And Jesus said, "Come, Peter." Then Peter left the boat and walked on the water to Jesus. Wow. We're going to spend the next semester drilling down on that scenario, that narrative. The foundation of our community groups. This is the backstory. This walk that Peter did on the water has so many aspects of following Christ. Number 1, it has the wisdom to discern when Jesus is present. Ever been in a situation you want, hey, where's God? It has the courage, an aspect of getting out of the boat. The euphoria of walking on the water and the panic of sinking, and the sense of relief that Jesus is strong enough to save. Let me just pause right there for a minute. Coming out of this pandemic, that kind of describes some of our lives, some of our days. Man, there's Jesus. I can walk on the water. So you start to do that, you start to move forward, and you sink, and you panic. And then there's a sense of relief. Oh, thankfully God was there. This story is intriguing because in a way, it's Jesus' invitation to all of us. You see, Jesus is still looking for followers who are willing to get out of the boat, come to him on the water. So, if you're up for the challenge in this semester, I would say this: let's go take a walk. Let's go take a hike. But in this case, it's on the water. And then we have to convince ourselves as we do this that everything will be okay. I have to have a positive attitude. I have to believe in faith. There's a storm. I'm afraid. Is that Jesus? Is he speaking to my life? The real question is this: is there someone greater than me that's guiding my life? Every day people wake up and try to convince themselves that everything will be okay if they have a positive attitude. But here's the real question. Is there someone greater than me that is guiding my life? And is his character and confidence such that I can trust him with my life? That brings us to the beautiful story of fear and faith about Jesus and his friends in the boat. Jesus comes to them on the water. When they got into the boat, it was still light. It was a regular day on the job. But the story says that Jesus comes to them around 3 a.m. at the height of the storm. And those are the conditions that Jesus is going to have Peter get out of the boat. The worst possible scenario. 3 in the morning. I'm sure that they're dead dog tired. In a storm, stressful. But in that condition, Jesus says, "Sure, Peter, come on." Peter gets out of the boat and then he begins to sink. So here's the real question. Did Peter fail? Before I get into that, let me ask us all one question. Have you ever failed? Have you ever said the wrong thing? Have you ever done the wrong thing? Have you ever experienced social, relational, financial, vocational, spiritual failure of any kind? I would say raise your hand, but I'm doing a recording. But just think about it. Out on the water, there's a storm. It's dark. It's windy and there are problems. Houston, we got a problem. Yes, we do. I'm afraid. And if you get out of your boat, whatever your boat is, there's a good possibility that you might sink. You might have problems, and yeah, you know what? I could fail. But if I don't get out of the boat, I'll never walk on water. You see, walking on water is a kind of a picture of doing something together, as God gives us the power to do it that I could never do independently. God takes me to areas that I could never get on my own. What I mean by that is following Jesus always is going to be a choice between comfort and security and the safety of the boat and the risk of getting out of the boat. All of us that follow God have a choice to make. And generally, it involves comfort or growth. Are we into the comfort? We like comfort. Let me ask you a question here, a pop quiz. What's the #1 best-selling chair in America? What's the name of it? Anybody? Kick it around. Answer, Lazy Boy. It's not Risky Boy. It's not Work Boy, but it's Lazy Boy. What am I saying? I think for the most part, we like to chill. Kind of an old term's gone by now. We like to veg. And we like to do it on our couch in front of a TV, sports, something, what they call a Netflix binge. You see, the disciples that stayed in the boat were boat potatoes. What does that mean, Pastor? Well, because if you can be a couch potato, maybe you can be a boat potato? Yeah, bad joke. That's a dad joke. I'll say that for Father's Day. They wanted to follow Jesus, but they didn't want to take the risk of getting out of the boat to follow him. You see, so comfort, which sounds so inviting, may be one of the most dangerous things of all. The boat may not be as safe as we think it is. When I say that, I think of this story. Remember the Titanic? Maiden voyage. They claimed it to be unsinkable. So I'm thinking that they're thinking, when I get in the boat on the Titanic, next stop, America. But unfortunately, we know the tragic events that happened to the Titanic. You see, there are a lot of good reasons to get out of the boat. For one thing, it's the only way you grow. We need challenges and risks if we're going to learn and if we're going to grow. When you give into comfort, though, your life becomes stagnant. But the most significant single reason why someone ought to get out of their boat is because that's where Jesus is. It's when you're willing to take the risk of obeying God and saying, "Yes, Lord, I'm getting out of the boat and I'm coming to meet you." That's the whole story about Peter. This is what I've learned. Peter was the first one to get out of the boat and to walk on the water. And to be honest with you, he's the last one. No one's ever done it since. Peter does this in the story. He gets out of the boat. You see, it's just him and Jesus. Then he gets his eyes off Jesus and he notices there's a wind. He sees a wave. It's a high wave. It's night. It's dark. He looks around. There's a storm. And what does the Bible say? That he begins to sink. You see, failure is not so much about what happens, but how we process that failure. So here's my question for us. Think about this. Did Peter fail? In a sense, I guess he did. His faith was not strong enough. He took his eyes off Jesus and he began to sink. But this is what I think. 11 bigger failures were sitting in the boat that didn't go to Jesus. It's interesting. Nobody ever criticizes their failure. Their failure goes unnoticed, uncritiqued, unscripted. Only Peter knew the embarrassment and humiliation of public failure. But I'll tell you two things that only Peter knew. Peter knew the feeling of what it was to walk on the water. He knew exactly that step of faith. And I don't ever want to forget that. Once you walk on water, you will never forget the experience and the power of God. It marks you until the day that you die. Another thing only Peter knew was that he had the hand of God in his life. And that hand was strong enough to pick him up and rescue him. What matters is when somebody gets out of the boat, the credit belongs to the man who is actually there. Here's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and it says, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." End quote. Sometimes we all fail, all of us, but Jesus is still looking for someone to love him enough and trust him enough to leave what is safe and comfortable. But this one thing is true. If you don't walk on water, you don't get out of the boat. But if you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. As we move forward in our lessons, I'm going to do my best to teach every one of us to be water walkers.